The Tequila Worm by Viola Canales, Chapter 13, The Packing Shed. The door slammed. It feels strange doing math so early, Berta said, throwing her book on the kitchen table. I measured coffee into the pot. Please make it extra strong. I have my final tomorrow. God, how I hate math. But Sophia, it doesn't take a math whiz to know that you have a big zero toward that $400 you still need. Yes, I know. But let's get cracking on your math. I sat next to Berta and opened her book. Berta shut it. I can't even look at numbers without a ton of coffee. So what are we going to do to get your $400? I'll get a job. What job? You know how things are around here with so many people unemployed, and you don't have any experience. I know. Why don't we get family and friends to sponsor you, to be your school padrinos? That's the same idea you have with the dresses. Papa said he'd take on some extra work, but I told him I want to earn this money myself. I'm helping Mom with some sewing projects this summer. You can help and we'll... I started to laugh. Berta, you're sweet. No wonder Jaime's crazy about you. Me? Sew? No, I'll just go downtown and find a job. But how? I'll just get out there and figure it out. Sophia, you are a mule. At least let me drive you there. I'll be fine. I jumped up. Coffee's ready. Now open that book. The next day I woke early, dressed, and then walked toward Main Street in downtown McAllen. Summer had just started, but it was already sweltering, with temperatures over 100 by noon. It was about a 3-mile walk. When I got to Main Street, I dusted off my shoes, straightened my skirt and my shirt, and double-checked that all my buttons were buttoned straight. I stared at the stores. I had no idea how one went about asking for a job, what I'd say if they asked if I'd ever worked before, or even a sales lady or cashier or anything. When I opened the glass door to the Popular, a woman's dress shop, I froze. Sales ladies were buzzing around, waiting on customers, and they all wore makeup and earrings and high heels and stockings. My flat brown shoes and bare legs seemed terribly out of place. Why in the world would any woman want me to wait on her, I thought, much less ask me for any fashion advice. I walked around in a daze and then pretended to be looking at some blouses. I jumped when I heard a woman's voice behind me asking if I wanted any help. I mumbled that I was only looking. The next minute, I was out the door. I walked farther down Main Street. Most of the stores were either dress shops or clothing stores. In Woolworth's, I could see myself unboxing toys, sticking plastic flowers into those green styrofoam squares, even folding towels, and maybe if I was really lucky, they'd let me serve scoops of ice cream and glasses of Coca-Cola at the long red food counter. Excuse me, who do I see to apply for a job? I finally asked the lady wearing a name tag. She looked me up and down. Aren't you a little young? Back there, she pointed. Go ask for an application. I took the 2 long pages and struggled through the application. When I went to hand it in, I was embarrassed by the crossouts and scribbling in the margins, but I made sure to smile and thank the woman who finally took it. I spent the next 5 hours walking into every business on Main Street, even the dress shops, and filling out applications. But when I started back home, I dragged my feet. I probably wouldn't get a single call. I had absolutely no experience, and the unemployment rate in McAllen was one of the highest in the nation. But if I didn't make the $400, I wouldn't be able to go to St. Luke's. As I crossed the 18th Street Canal and then the railroad tracks, I heard machines. I looked up and saw that I was near the 2 packing sheds 4 blocks from my house. I had always seen and known about the packing sheds, but I had never given them much thought. All I knew was that they were open and busy during the summer picking season. This was when we'd get knocks on the front screen door and find young boys selling bags and bunches of carrots, onions, bell peppers, cantaloupes, cucumbers, whatever extra fruit or vegetables were being cleaned and packed in the packing sheds that day. The rest was boxed, loaded, and shipped on the railroad that ran right in front of the sheds. I walked to the packing shed and up the wooden stairs. Inside, I saw a whole army of well-dressed Mexicans working. Men were operating noisy machines that dumped loads and loads of green cucumbers on a moving conveyor belt. A row of women stood on wooden pallets by the moving belt and tossed the cucumbers into large wooden bins. Another row of women stood on the other side of the belt and packed the cucumbers into white cardboard boxes. Young boys worked at one end of the shed making boxes. Forklifts moved full boxes to the far end of the shed near the railroad tracks. How well dressed the workers were. The women wore nice dresses and makeup, the men good shirts and trousers, even though the shed was dank and dirty. Its floors were completely covered with water, and the greasy machines ground away incessantly. As I stood staring, a man wearing a white hat and shirt and crisp blue jeans walked up to me. He squinted. "Are you looking for a job?" "Yes." He led me to his tiny office and told me to fill out a slip of paper. "Good, you can start working this minute." The man took me, stunned, to where the women stood in front of the moving conveyor belt. Hundreds upon hundreds of cucumbers kept moving on it. The man said, "Stand on the pallet just like the women. Your job is to sort the cucumbers into large, medium, and small by tossing them into one of the 3 bins on the other side of the belt. Toss the large ones into the first bin, the medium into the second, and the smallest into the third. The women on the other side will pack them into boxes." I now stood on the wooden pallet working at my very first job. I didn't feel grown up and proud, as I thought I would, but completely overwhelmed and panicky, for the cucumbers moved down the conveyor belt like a furious green river, and they all seemed to be about the same size. As I stood before the rushing river, I quickly glanced at the women to my right and to my left. They looked like wild windmills, tossing cucumbers left and right. Slowly, I started to pick and throw one cucumber and then another, still confused about the sizes. After 30 minutes and then a whole hour, I was tired, and the cucumbers just kept coming faster and faster. When I looked down at the wet floor underneath the pallet, I noticed that the women on each side of me were wearing pumps. How could they manage to stand here all day? During a 10-minute break, the belt stopped and the women got together and talked. Some of the men went out to smoke. I found a payphone and called home. "Papa, I found a job. I'm working at the packing shed down the street, the big one." "Ay, mija, that's really hard work. Come home. I'll find a way to raise the money," Papa said. "No, Papa, please. I want to earn the money myself." "You're too much like me, mija. That's not always a good thing. Come home. Relax. Spend the summer with Lucy and Berta. Go visit the school." "I'd rather work, Papa. We have a late shipment, so I'll be late tonight." I worked until 10 o'clock that night. When Papa came to pick me up, I was dizzy and could hardly feel my legs. I climbed into the car and sank into the seat. "Papa, the Mexican workers are all dressed up as if going to church, even though it's so dark and dirty and noisy in there. And we all stand on wooden pallets because the floor is completely covered with water." The next day, Papa came to get me at midnight. Mama was still up when we arrived home, but I was so exhausted that I didn't eat the dinner she'd warmed up for me. I just fell into bed, wearing the wet jeans and t-shirt I'd worn all day. The days and then the weeks all seemed to blur together into a haze. All I knew was that I'd somehow gotten through the 10 or 12-hour days, but I also knew that the cucumbers were making me crazy. I dreamed about cucumbers, walls of them falling on top of me as they sprouted faces and screamed at me. Then they started to attack me during the day. I caught myself squeezing Papa's tube of hair gel onto my toothbrush or putting the coffee pot inside the refrigerator and seeing green cucumbers everywhere. I saw them on walls, on faces, even in the sky. After a month, I stood there at my post, shifting from one foot to the other and doing my best to sort, when the man with the white hat appeared next to me and said loudly, "If you don't work much faster, I'll have to let you go." He walked back to his tiny office and the woman to my right leaned over. "Don't worry," she said in Spanish. "He always does this. Picks on somebody or other, thinking this will just scare everybody into working even harder." I smiled, but kept my eyes on my flying hands. Faster, faster. At the 10-minute break, I asked her, "How long have you been working here?" 5 years, she said. "I come from a little village in Mexico near the border." I so wanted to ask why she and the others dressed up to come to work in this wet and dirty place, but I didn't. By my last month at the packing shed, I knew I hated cucumbers above anything else in the whole world and vowed to never, ever eat another one. But that last month of my first job, I also received my first proposal. I was sitting on the steps during a break, trying to bring my stiff legs back to life, when a young man in a nice pair of black trousers and a long-sleeved white shirt walked up to me. I knew he drove a forklift. He smiled at me and then bowed his head politely. He said, "My name is Miguel, and I think you're really pretty." He paused, cleared his throat, and asked, "Would you be interested in marrying me?" I shot up and squinted, bewildered. He smiled and repeated, "Would you be interested in marrying me?" This time less shyly. I looked down at my faded wet jeans and my torn sneakers. "I don't even know you." He shook his head. "The picking season is almost over, and I'm afraid I'll never see you again. That's why I'm proposing to you now, before I have to go back to Mexico. I'm just 14 and haven't even thought of marriage. Actually, I'm going away to school." "What is your name?" Just then the break ended, the conveyor belt started moving again, and we returned to our jobs. I tossed cucumber after cucumber into bins, and I thought I finally understood why they all dressed up in their best. I needed, not just wanted, more than this. When I got home that night, I sat down at the kitchen table. "I made your favorite dish," Mama said, "cheese enchiladas." "I know, Mama, but I'm just not hungry." I laughed and told her about my first marriage proposal. "That's sad, Sophia." Mama shook her head. "And things are only getting crazier. Young people used to meet in plazas, at dances, at church, under the safe eyes of the community. But now everything is changing so fast. I just heard La Plaza Hotel is putting a pool in the courtyard where your papa and I met. And I'm especially worried about Lucy now that you're going away. Things will really get crazy by the time she grows up." I nodded. For the first time ever, I detected a sense of fear in Mama, that even her web of comadres was no match against these changes. And maybe, I thought, going away to school might help me help her someday.